I've learned something the hard way, and maybe you have too. Not everyone deserves the truth about your life. That sounds harsh, I know. But sometimes the pain of opening up to the wrong person teaches you more than any book or quote ever could. There was someone once, I won't name them, who did something that, at the time, felt like loyalty. They cut someone else off, defended me fiercely, and made it seem like I was the most important person in their world. And I won't lie, it felt good. There's something intoxicating about being chosen like that, especially when you've spent so much of your life questioning whether you were worth choosing at all. But here's where it turned dark. That same person who once stood up for me and made me feel safe eventually turned that same fire in my direction. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, but it was cold, a subtle betrayal. And I realized maybe they didn't really choose me. Maybe they just choose sides, depending on what benefits them most. You see, when someone betrays another person for your sake, it might feel like devotion, but it's not. It's a mirror of how they handle conflict, how they navigate relationships, not with integrity, but with strategy. And the most dangerous thing, I ignored the warning signs because I wanted so badly to believe in the bond. I remember confiding something deeply personal to them, something I hadn't told anyone else. It was one of those moments where the walls finally fall and you let someone into the part of your life you usually keep behind locked doors. And at first, they listened. They seemed gentle, almost moved. But later, I found out they had repeated my words to someone else. Not cruelly, not even obviously, but enough to make me feel stripped bare, like my truth was just passed around. That kind of betrayal doesn't just hurt. It shakes you. It makes you question your own judgment. Why did I trust them? Why didn't I see this coming? Was it my fault? And that's where the real damage happens, not just in what they did, but in what it makes you start doing to yourself. I think that's what Jung meant when he talked about betrayal as a reflection of the inner world. People don't betray you because of who you are. They betray you because of who they are, their values, their wounds, their fears. But when you don't understand that, you internalize the betrayal. You start to wonder if your truth is too much, too risky, too shameful to be shared. That's when the walls go back up. That's when you start holding everything in. And sure, it protects you, but it also starves you. There's this balance I've been trying to find between openness and discernment, between being honest and being wise. And the hardest part? Learning that protecting your truth isn't weakness. It's not avoidance. It's actually a form of deep respect for yourself. The world tells us that being open is noble. That vulnerability is strength, and it is when it's shared with the right people. But too often we mistake charisma for character. We think someone who's on our side is also someone who will guard our soul. But not all allies are safe. Not all listeners are trustworthy. And the truth? That's sacred. Your story, your pain, your hope, they're not small things. They're not just words to fill silence. They're pieces of you, and not everyone has earned the right to hold those pieces in their hands. I used to think silence was a kind of cowardice, that not speaking meant I wasn't brave. But I see it differently now. Silence, when intentional, is wisdom. It's a quiet boundary. It says, I'm not shutting you out. I'm just choosing to keep myself whole. I'm still learning how to do that. I still make mistakes. I still sometimes speak too soon or trust too quickly. But when I do, I remind myself, the lesson isn't to close off entirely. The lesson is to pay attention, to notice who leans in with care and who just collects stories for leverage. And you know what else? If you've been burned before, you're not broken, you're waking up. That pain wasn't meaningless. It was a kind of initiation into a deeper version of yourself, one that knows what it means to guard something precious. So if this resonates with you, if you've ever shared something real and had it used against you, I want you to hear this clearly. Your truth is still beautiful. It didn't lose value just because someone didn't treat it right. And you are still worthy of being seen, fully, deeply, safely. But next time, maybe wait. Maybe hold your truth a little longer. Maybe look at how someone treats the stories of others before you hand them your own. Because once you realize the cost of misplaced trust, you also realize the power of keeping some things sacred, not out of fear, out of love. I used to think gossip was harmless, just something people did to fill the silence. You know, that casual chatter about someone else's life, whispered over coffee or in passing texts. But I've come to see it differently. Gossip isn't just talk. It's a window into how someone relates to truth, especially someone else's. There was a woman I worked with once. We weren't close, but she had that warm, magnetic energy. Everyone liked her. She always knew the latest news about our colleagues, who was getting a divorce, who was applying for another job, who was struggling behind the scenes. At first, I thought she was just well-connected. I even found her stories entertaining. Harmless, I told myself. But then one day, I heard her talk about me. She repeated something I'd said in confidence. Nothing huge, but it was personal. Something I'd only shared with her during a vulnerable moment. And just like that, it was out there. Retold like a funny anecdote, stripped of its weight, passed around like a piece of gossip candy. I laughed it off on the surface, but deep down I felt small, exposed. It wasn't just the betrayal that hurt. It was the realization that I'd been naive. I thought I was building connection, but I was feeding information to someone who saw it as currency. I gave her a piece of me, and she spent it for social capital. I started paying more attention after that, and I noticed a pattern. The people who gossip the most often say the least about themselves. They hide behind other people's stories because they're afraid to face their own. They turn other lives into entertainment so they don't have to examine their own pain. Jung called this projection. He said we often cast the parts of ourselves we don't want to face onto others. And once I understood that, something clicked. Gossip isn't really about other people. It's about the person doing the talking. It's a way of saying, look over there, not at me. That realization made me more compassionate, but also more cautious, because if someone is willing to dissect someone else's life in front of me, they'll do the same with mine behind closed doors. No matter how friendly they seem, no matter how convincing their empathy looks on the surface, I think many of us share because we want to be known, understood. It's such a basic human desire, but in that hunger to be seen, we sometimes overlook the type of person we're handing our truth to. And here's the hard truth: not everyone can hold our honesty with care. Some people are collectors. They gather stories, weaknesses, fears, not to help, but to feel powerful, to feed their own sense of importance, or to escape their own discomfort. They wrap it in the language of concern, but the intent is hollow. There's an emotional cost to sharing yourself with someone like that, not just because your story might be repeated, but because the experience makes you question your own judgment. You start second-guessing everyone. You pull back, not just from gossipers, but from genuine connection. You build a fortress where a home should be. That's the real danger of betrayal. It doesn't just damage trust in others. It damages the way you trust yourself. But healing from that doesn't mean you stop trusting altogether. It means you refine your instincts. You stop mistaking attention for care. You start watching how people speak about others, because that's how they'll speak about you. And silence becomes your ally. You realize you don't have to explain yourself to everyone. You don't owe your story to anyone who hasn't earned it. Some things are sacred, not secret, just sacred. They deserve protection. They deserve respect. I've learned that gossip is a signal. It tells you how someone handles vulnerability, not just theirs, but others. And if they handle other people's pain carelessly, they will not treat yours any better, no matter how close you feel, no matter how much they say they care. So now I listen more than I speak. Not because I'm afraid, but because I've learned to honor my own truth. I still believe in connection. I still believe in opening up. But I believe in discernment even more. And if someone gossips to me, I take it as a quiet warning. This is not a safe place. It doesn't mean I cut them out, but it does mean I stop handing them pieces of myself. You deserve to be known, truly, but you also deserve to be protected. And that starts with knowing the difference between someone who listens to understand and someone who listens to retell. Because when you guard your truth, not from fear but from wisdom, that's not hiding, that's self-respect. And that's how you begin to trust again, from the inside out. There's something oddly comforting about staying friends with someone you used to love. At least, that's what I used to tell myself. You already know each other so well. Your inside jokes, your favorite places, the way you take your coffee. And after the dust of the breakup settles, it can feel like, why not keep them in your life? Why lose that connection entirely? But there's a hidden cost to that closeness, and I didn't realize it until it was too late. After one particularly difficult breakup, we tried the just friends thing. At first, it was smooth. Too smooth, even. We still laughed, still sent each other memes, still talked late at night. There was this false sense of security, like I could still be fully myself around them. Same openness, same vulnerability, but without the romance. I convinced myself it was mature, evolved, that we were different, that we had moved on. But then I told her something important. I shared my plan to leave the city, to take a new job, to start over somewhere quieter, somewhere that didn't echo with old memories. She smiled, said she was happy for me, said it made sense. And I believed her. Why wouldn't I? 2 days later, that information was everywhere. Mutual friends, co-workers, even my manager knew about the move. And suddenly the job I had planned to leave quietly became a maze of awkward conversations, delays, passive resistance. My clean exit was gone. The timing got messy. The new job almost slipped away. She apologized, said it was an accident, claimed she didn't mean any harm. But I knew, deep down, it wasn't just a slip. It was something darker, a need to still have some control, some way to stay close, even if it meant disrupting my path forward. That's when it hit me. The past doesn't always stay in the past, especially when you invite it into your present and hand it the keys. Carl Jung once said that our previous relationships leave shadows, not just memories. They're part of our unconscious. And when you share your present life with someone who's lived through your past, it creates a strange loop. They can use everything they know against you, sometimes without even realizing it. Or worse, sometimes because they do. I don't think she hated me. I don't even think she wanted to hurt me. I think part of her still needed to feel significant in my life. And what better way than to insert herself into my next chapter? But here's the truth I've had to swallow. Even if the love was once real, even if the goodbye was peaceful, they are no longer a safe place for your secrets. Because once a person has seen the most tender parts of you, your dreams, your doubts, your triggers, they hold power. And that power becomes risky the moment the relationship changes. Even the best intentions can turn sour when old wounds are left open. I know people say staying friends with your ex is a sign of maturity. Maybe for some it is, but for me, it became a way to delay the grief, to pretend nothing really ended, and to keep a part of myself frozen in a version of the past that felt familiar, even if it wasn't healthy. Now I think of emotional safety like territory. After a breakup, that territory changes, and you get to decide who enters, who stays, and who's gently kept at the border, not out of bitterness, but out of respect for yourself, for your growth, for your future. And that doesn't mean you hate them. It just means you love yourself enough to not hand over your heart's updates to someone who doesn't belong in that story anymore. I've also learned this. Forgiveness doesn't require access. You can forgive someone, you can even wish them well, but you don't have to give them the same access to your soul they once had. That access was earned through love, and when love shifts or ends, access does too. So if you've ever thought, well, we're friends now, so it's okay to tell them everything, pause. Ask yourself, are they part of the world you're building now, or a relic of the world you had to leave? Not every chapter needs a cameo from the previous cast. Some parts of your journey deserve to be written with new energy, new people, new space, untouched by old dynamics and quiet resentments. And most importantly, your future deserves to be protected from echoes of the past. So if you're walking that line between staying friends and staying safe, let this be a gentle reminder. It's okay to draw new boundaries. It's okay to keep some dreams to yourself. And it's okay to walk forward without looking back, even if you once loved who was behind you. That's not cold. That's not cruel. That's growth. There's something unsettling about watching someone you know unravel under the influence of alcohol. It's like a veil drops, and underneath is a version of them you barely recognize. Looser, louder, sometimes funnier, but also unpredictable. And when you've shared something personal with someone like that, even once, the risk starts to live in your body. I've had a few of those moments, times when a secret I'd shared in good faith found its way into a drunken story, retold for laughs. At first, it didn't seem intentional. I wanted to believe it wasn't. Maybe they didn't remember. Maybe they thought it was harmless. But deep down, I knew. Once a truth leaves your mouth, it becomes vulnerable to the shape others give it. And when alcohol is involved, that shape can twist into something you never intended. There was a guy I used to be close with. He was magnetic, charismatic, the kind of person everyone gravitates toward at a party. He had this way of making you feel like the only one in the room, like your story mattered. So when I opened up to him one night, I didn't think twice. I told him something that had been sitting heavy on my chest, something about my family, something I wasn't proud of. He nodded, gave me that reassuring look, and said, "You can trust me, always." Fast forward a few weeks later, another party, a few drinks in. I'm standing across the room when I hear my story coming out of his mouth, loud, dramatic, and exaggerated for effect. Laughter, shocked gasps, my private shame turned into someone else's punchline. And the worst part? He wasn't being cruel. He wasn't even aware of the damage he was doing. In that moment, the alcohol had dissolved not just his inhibitions, but his sense of care, of boundaries, of what was his to share and what was mine to protect. That was the night I realized something Carl Jung had written about addiction, that it's not just about substance, but about the soul. People who lean too heavily on escape, whether through alcohol or anything else, are often people who haven't made peace with themselves. And if someone can't hold their own truth sober, they're not going to hold yours safely drunk. It took me a long time to stop blaming myself for that night. I kept replaying it in my head. Why did I tell him? Why did I think he would protect it? But eventually I stopped asking why he failed me and started asking why I gave away something sacred without checking if the vessel was strong enough to hold it. Because here's the truth. Trust isn't just about connection, it's about capacity. And some people, especially those who struggle to stay grounded, simply don't have the capacity to hold another person's truth without dropping it. I'm not saying people who drink are untrustworthy, but if someone regularly loses control of their thoughts, their words, their presence, then giving them pieces of your soul becomes a gamble. And sometimes the house wins. It's a strange grief, realizing someone you care about isn't emotionally safe. It doesn't mean you stop loving them, but it does mean you love yourself more. Enough to be cautious, enough to observe not just how someone acts when they're sober and composed, but who they become when the mask drops. And sometimes the mask isn't hiding evil. It's hiding emptiness, a lack of anchoring, a void that no amount of stories, secrets, or booze can fill. So now, when I meet someone who drinks heavily, I still engage, I still connect, but I keep certain parts of myself tucked away, not out of fear, but out of self-respect, because my truth, like yours, is tender, and it deserves to be handled with care. The silence I choose now isn't a wall, it's a filter. It allows me to decide what parts of myself to reveal and when, not based on pressure, but on wisdom. You can still enjoy someone's company, laugh at their jokes, dance at their parties, but that doesn't mean you owe them access to your inner world. Not everyone who's fun is also safe. Not everyone who seems present will remember you in the morning, and not everyone who asks, "What's really going on with you?" is ready for the answer. If you've ever been burned by someone who let your truth slip during a drunken moment, let me tell you this: it's not your fault for being open. It's their responsibility to hold what you gave them with care, and they didn't. But don't let their carelessness close your heart completely. Let it refine you. You don't have to be silent forever, just wise. You don't have to isolate, just choose. Because sharing your truth isn't about finding someone who will listen in the moment. It's about finding someone who will remember it when it matters. And that kind of presence, it's rare. It's worth waiting for. I used to think connection was about how much you shared with someone, how quickly you could dive into deep conversations, how open you were, how raw and real it got. That felt like trust. That felt like intimacy. But I've learned sometimes the real red flag is when you're the only one opening up. There was a guy I worked with. We'd grab coffee, talk between meetings, sometimes walk home together after work. He was polite, always asked how I was doing, and seemed genuinely interested. Over time, I found myself sharing more. Stories about my family, my anxiety, the burnout I was battling silently. He'd nod, occasionally offer a thoughtful comment, but mostly he just listened. At first, I appreciated it. It felt safe, like he was holding space. But after months of these conversations, I realized something odd. I knew almost nothing about him, not where he was from, not what kept him up at night, not who he leaned on when life got heavy. He was there, but not present. He gave nothing in return. And then one day, I overheard him talking to another colleague, repeating something I'd told him, not maliciously, but casually, like it was just another piece of office gossip. My stomach dropped. That's when it hit me. The silence wasn't respect. It was distance. His safe space was a one-way street, one where I was always the one undressing emotionally while he stood fully clothed. Carl Jung said that relationships are built on mutual transparency. That if there's no reciprocity, it's not a connection. It's a performance. And I realized I had been performing vulnerability for someone who never intended to join me in that space. There's a particular kind of loneliness that comes from sharing your soul with someone who hides theirs. You walk away from each conversation feeling like you've given too much and received nothing but echoes. And it's not always obvious at first. These people often feel comforting. Their silence can seem like calm. Their lack of expression can be mistaken for depth. But over time, it becomes clear they're not silent because they're thoughtful. They're silent because they're unwilling. Unwilling to risk. Unwilling to reveal. Unwilling to meet you halfway. And that's not intimacy, that's emotional voyeurism. Looking back, I don't think he ever intended to hurt me, but intention doesn't undo the effect. When someone refuses to be seen, they're not just protecting themselves, they're also denying you the experience of being fully seen in return. That realization changed how I approach connection. Now I watch for balance, not perfect equality, but effort. I notice whether someone responds to my openness with their own, whether they're willing to lean in and be human with me, or whether they just want to listen from a safe distance, collecting pieces of me without offering their own. Because here's what I've learned: vulnerability is sacred, and sharing it should be an exchange, not a sacrifice. You're not needy for wanting that. You're not overthinking it. You're just finally recognizing that real connection requires both people to show up, fully, honestly, messily. And if someone keeps you at arm's length while you bare your heart, that's not connection, that's containment. It's a quiet form of control, and it leaves you feeling more alone than you were before. So now I pay attention to silence, not just what someone doesn't say, but why they don't say it. I ask myself, is this a space I feel seen in return, or am I pouring into a void? And if it's the latter, I pull back, not because I'm bitter, but because I'm learning to protect the parts of me that deserve to be held, not handled. You deserve mutuality. You deserve someone who meets your honesty with theirs, someone who doesn't just listen, but joins you in the truth. And until you find that, it's okay to be quiet, not guarded, not cold, just intentional, because your story is too important to be told in rooms where no one else is speaking. Some of the hardest lessons in life don't come from enemies. They come from the people who disappeared when you needed them most. You don't always see it coming. In fact, that's what makes it so painful. You think they've always been around. They know me. They'll be here when it counts. But when life cracks open, when grief, loss, failure, or crisis hits, they vanish, quietly, without explanation. And you're left wondering if they were ever really there at all. I remember a time when everything in my life was collapsing. Work was a mess. My health was shaky. Finances were tight. Every day felt like walking through mud with weights on my shoulders. So I did what I thought was right. I reached out to friends, to people who had laughed with me, celebrated birthdays, shared long talks into the night. I didn't ask for much, just presence, just to be held in the storm. But one by one, they faded. I'm so sorry you're going through this, but I've got a lot on my plate right now. Let's definitely catch up soon, maybe next week. I don't really know what to say. At first, I tried to understand. Everyone has their limits, everyone's busy, but after enough silence, enough unanswered texts, enough polite deflections, something deeper set in, a kind of ache that doesn't come from loneliness, but from abandonment. And it's not just the absence of help, it's what that absence says. It whispers, "You're too much. Your pain is inconvenient. You're better off alone," and that's a hard thing to unhear. Carl Jung talked about emotional availability, how some people simply aren't equipped to handle the depth of another person's suffering. It's not that they're evil, it's that your pain threatens something inside them. Maybe it reminds them of their own unresolved wounds. Maybe it breaks the illusion that everything can be fixed. Or maybe it just demands more presence than they're willing to give. But the result is the same. They vanish. And you're left cleaning up your life with fewer hands than you expected. I spent a long time feeling bitter, angry even. I wanted to confront them, ask them why they weren't there, demand some explanation. But eventually, that need dissolved into something quieter. Clarity. They didn't disappear because of me. They disappeared because of their own limitations, their own discomfort, their own fears, and expecting them to be something they're not only prolonged my pain. That clarity, though painful, was also freeing. It taught me that not everyone in your life is meant to go the distance. Some people are here for the sunshine, the good news, the celebrations, the surface level ease. And that doesn't make them bad. It just makes them seasonal, temporary characters in a much longer story. And once I stopped expecting depth from shallow roots, I made peace with it. But here's the beautiful part. Once you go through a season like that, the people who stay become sacred. They don't always have the right words. They might not fix anything, but they show up. They sit with you. They hold space. They remind you that presence matters more than solutions. Those are the ones you tell your truth to, the ones who earn the right to see you not just in the light, but in the dark. So if someone left when you needed them most, I want you to hear this. It wasn't your fault. You weren't too heavy. You weren't too much. They were simply not ready. And maybe, just maybe, their absence created the silence you needed to hear your own voice again, to rebuild from a place of truth, not pretense, to discover your own resilience rather than depending on borrowed strength. Because in the end, the ones who couldn't stay taught you how to stand. And now, when I walk through something hard, I don't ask who will be there. I ask who's already proven they are. The answers are fewer, but they're stronger, quieter, truer, and that's enough. You don't need everyone, you just need the right ones. There's a strange comfort in talking to strangers. Maybe it's the illusion of safety, the sense that because they don't know your history, they can't judge your present. You're free to reinvent yourself, to open up, to say things you wouldn't dare tell the people closest to you. But there's danger in that too. And I learned that the hard way. I was on a train once, headed to visit my mom for her birthday. I'd bought her a new phone, something sleek and modern, wrapped neatly in a box in my backpack. Across from me sat a man who seemed kind. He smiled, struck up a conversation. We talked about everything and nothing. Family, work, the weather, even a little philosophy. He asked about my trip, and without thinking, I told him about the gift. I even pulled it out to show him, just for a moment. It felt harmless, human. I thought, this is what connection looks like. Two strangers sharing a small piece of life together. The next morning, when I reached my destination and opened my bag, the box was gone. He had vanished at the previous stop. No trace, no name, just an empty space where trust used to be. It wasn't the phone that hurt. Not really. It was the betrayal, the embarrassment, the quiet voice inside that whispered, "You should have known better." I replayed the moment in my head over and over. Why did I share so much? Why did I let my guard down? That incident became a metaphor for something deeper. You see, when we meet someone new, especially in moments of loneliness, we project onto them. Jung wrote about this often, how we cast our unmet needs onto others, seeing in them not who they are, but who we want them to be. We imagine safety where there is none. We see wisdom in empty words. We confuse friendliness with trustworthiness. And in doing so, we put ourselves at risk, not just physically, but emotionally. We hand over our truth without checking if the other person is capable of holding it. It's not always malicious. Most people aren't out to harm you, but many are unfiltered, unstable, or simply careless. And your vulnerability, shared too freely, becomes just another detail in their chaotic lives, one they might misuse, forget, or distort. I'm not saying never talk to strangers. I still believe in openness, in kindness, in those serendipitous conversations that can shift your perspective. But now I approach them with more awareness. I ask myself, what part of me is seeking connection right now? Is this curiosity or a quiet desperation to be seen? Because there's a difference between being open and being exposed. Openness comes from strength. Exposure comes from need. And when we're desperate for understanding, When we haven't received it from the people who matter, we'll sometimes try to get it anywhere we can, even from people who haven't earned it. That day on the train, I didn't just lose a phone. I lost a little piece of innocence, the part of me that believed every stranger was a potential friend. And in its place, I grew something better: discernment. Now, I know that trust isn't something you give away like candy. It's something you build, slowly, intentionally, with people who show, again and again, that they can be trusted. And sometimes silence is the most loving thing you can offer yourself, not because you're afraid, but because you've learned to protect what matters. So if you've ever opened up to someone too quickly and regretted it, please don't shame yourself. You weren't foolish. You were human. You were trying to connect, trying to be real. That's brave. But let the experience teach you. Let it soften you in the right ways and strengthen you in the ones that matter. You don't have to close your heart. Just guard the door. There's this quote I once read: "Don't tell your plans to people who can't see the size of your vision." At the time, I brushed it off. Sounded dramatic, maybe even arrogant. But now I understand exactly what it means. It's not just about dreams or goals. It's about emotional boundaries. It's about who you allow into the sacred space of your future, and why that matters more than we realize. Some people, and you'll know them when you see them, have a way of draining your energy without ever laying a hand on you. They come with kind words, soft smiles, maybe even long histories with you, but underneath, there's a quiet undercurrent of envy, of resentment, of comparison. And envy is subtle. It hides well, but it changes the way someone reacts to your light. I had a colleague once. We were friendly, shared stories, joked over lunch. One day, I confided in him about a promotion I was up for, something I had worked years toward. I didn't brag. I just wanted to share my excitement, to feel seen. He smiled, said all the right things. "That's great, man. You deserve it." But the next few weeks were different. He became distant, short. I started hearing little comments floating through the office, things I'd never said or things I'd said in passing, twisted just enough to sound smug or entitled. And eventually, someone told me he'd been spreading rumors, that I only got the opportunity because of luck or favoritism or some imaginary backdoor deal. It stung. Not just because of the lies, but because I had trusted him with something pure, something that mattered to me, and he used it as fuel for his own discomfort. Jung talked a lot about projection, how people unload their unacknowledged emotions onto others. A jealous person might call you arrogant. A bitter person might call you ungrateful, not because it's true, but because it's easier to criticize you than confront their own emptiness. And when you share your truth with someone who operates from that place, you hand them ammunition, even if you don't mean to. That doesn't mean you should hide your joy or shrink your dreams, but it does mean you need to be selective about who gets to witness them, because your light can either be mirrored back with love or met with a shadow that doesn't belong to you. I've learned to pay attention to the micro reactions, the flicker in someone's eyes when you tell them good news, the silence that follows your excitement, the way their compliments land a second too late, like they're forcing the words through gritted teeth. It's subtle, but it's there. And when you notice it, you have a choice. You can keep explaining yourself to them, hoping they'll understand, or you can shift, not out of fear, but out of self-respect, because your plans, your healing, your inner transformation, they are yours. And not everyone deserves front row seats. Some people haven't done the work to celebrate others. They're still tangled in their own stories of lack, of not enough. And if you're not careful, they'll pull you into that narrative too. Protect your peace from those who can't protect their own. It's not about arrogance. It's not about thinking you're better. It's about recognizing that your energy is precious, that your voice, your vision, your truth, they flourish in safe soil. And safe doesn't always mean familiar. Sometimes the most dangerous people are the ones who've known you the longest, who pretend to cheer for you while quietly hoping you fail, just enough to make themselves feel better. So now I test for safety before I speak, not with suspicion, but with care. I look for joy in someone's eyes when I succeed. I look for curiosity, not comparison. I look for people who can hold space, who understand that someone else's win isn't their loss. And if I don't find it, I go quiet, not to punish, not to hide, but to preserve. Because truth is powerful, but in the wrong hands it becomes distorted, weaponized, undermined. And you, my friend, you are allowed to guard it, to protect the parts of you that are still becoming, to share your truth not with the loudest ears, but with the kindest hearts. That's not secrecy, that's sovereignty, and you've earned it.